Today on Technado, we'll be talking with Taylor Brown of Microsoft. He's on the virtualization team and is going to let us know what's coming out in Server 2019, as well as the future of containers at Microsoft. That's all coming up on Technado, starting right now. Hello and welcome to Technado. I'm your host, Peter Van Rysdam, and I'm joined, as always, by Don Bazette. Don, how are you doing today?
I am excited. We got another great interview lined up for the podcast. I love it when we do the interview segments. We get to learn a lot of really cool stuff.
Yeah, and we've kind of gone back to the well again. That's seemed to just be a great resource for us. A couple months ago, we sent Cherokee Booth and Mike Roderick, a couple of the entertainers here, down to the Microsoft Ignite show. We were able to have a booth there as well and meet some really interesting people. But of those people that we met, we also talked to a lot of people that work for Microsoft, and so we're able to get some insights into the team. And today we're talking with someone there who is working on some technologies that are pretty near and dear to your heart, it sounds like.
Absolutely. We got lucky to be able to interview the, we'll talk about his title later, but someone high up in the virtualization teams over at Microsoft. And they've been involved in the project since the early days of Microsoft's virtualization push, which is 18 years ago or something. So it's neat to talk to somebody who sees not only where Microsoft's been, where Microsoft's at, but also where Microsoft is going as far as virtualization, containers, and other things. So I'm excited for the interview. We'll get an idea of kind of what to expect in 2019.
All right, well, wait no longer. Let's go ahead and jump over that interview now with Taylor from the virtualization team. That's coming up right after this on Technado.
I'm James Packer. I'm the General Manager of Kirk ISS based in the Cayman Islands. I used ITProTV extensively in my last place. It grew very well, helped upskill the team. I had 110 engineers in the field and we had dozens of IT Pro accounts with the guys training, and last year alone they passed over 40 certs by using the online training. I think I can safely say without ITProTV I wouldn't be where I was today, because I only got this job on the back of the qualifications I have.
Welcome back to Technado, and as promised, we have an interview with someone that one of our edutainers met at the Ignite conference down in Orlando recently. We have Taylor Brown coming to us all the way from the West Coast, and Taylor, you are the lead PM manager over at Microsoft. So welcome to the show, first of all. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. We were having a little fun with your title before. So you're the lead PM manager, so you're the product manager, so the manager of other product managers. Is that correct?
Program manager.
Program managers. I know that. Yeah. I knew I'd mess it up. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your team and the people that you work with.
Yeah. So our team is responsible for HyperV and for Windows containers. And basically, what my team of program managers does is goes out, talks to customers, internal customers, external customers, partners. And we figure out what are the right features to build, what's the business priority around them, how do we bring them to market, how do we align all the things together, and then we deliver the kind of requirements down to our engineering team, work with them on building that feature out, and then go out and evangelize it when it's done and shipped. So pretty fun job.
Yeah,
get to do a lot of stuff.
Well, how did you get into this role? Because I mean, containers have just been something we've been talking about for 4 or 5 years, but you've been at Microsoft for looks like over 10 years. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, so I've been on the same team at Microsoft my entire 10 years, so actually almost 15 years this January. And I kind of came to Microsoft a little bit by accident and a little bit on purpose. So when I was a younger kid, I grew up in Colorado, always into computers, taking computers apart, putting them back together, playing around with stuff. And I'd always had this kind of idea that, man, it'd be really cool to go work for Microsoft. And our family moved from Colorado to Bellevue, Washington, right next to Redmond, when I was in high school. And, I went through high school, still playing around with computers, doing a lot of tech kind of stuff, but then it started into business school. And the company I was working for sold hardware to Microsoft. And so that ended up being my job, was to sell computer hardware to Microsoft to make a commission on it. And this was the days right before like Compaq and Dell really started to come out of the woodwork. And then basically overnight, Compaq and Dell just undercut what we could sell hardware to Microsoft for, and the company went out of business. And so I was left with no job and tuition payments due. So I went to the people I'd been working with at Microsoft and said, "Hey, you guys have a job for me? Something I can do?" And they hooked me up and got me into a contract position working on power management and USB and FireWire for Windows XP. So I did that for about a year and kind of got into it. I thought it was pretty fun. Started doing more programming. That summer, instead of taking summer classes, I went and got my Microsoft Certified Application Developer Certificate in .NET, C# 1.1, and came back to work on the Microsoft Smartwatch project. Got to ship that, and then I joined this brand new team called the Virtual Machines team. Microsoft had just acquired this company called Connectix, and we were going to go work on virtualization technology. And I've been there ever since. So that team then turned into the HyperV team, and I went from a development role into a program management role 7 or 8 years ago. And then shortly thereafter, we moved into working on containers, and I got to lead the container effort. And that's where we got into containers.
We certainly want to talk about containers, but as you were telling your story, I was involved with Microsoft a decent bit during a lot of what you were describing there, and I remember the Connectix acquisition and that product, Microsoft Virtual, it was Virtual Server 2005, I think, that came out, where it was. Oh, you have it on your shelf. Nice.
Yeah.
So, what was that like? Because I remember the big shift over to Hyper-V, where it was like, hey, we're just going to abandon this other product completely and redo everything from scratch. Like, what was that like? That was a big decision.
So it was a fairly small team at that point, and we did a team offsite to this like cabin at a park down the road from the campus, and it was like a shanty cabin, and got everybody together and said, okay, we're going to plan this new thing. We're part of the Windows team now. We have this great opportunity. If we want to go compete with VMware, and that was the real goal at the time, we need to do something more drastic and radical. And so here we go. We've got license. What would we build if we could build anything we wanted? And so we sat around for a day and kind of sketched out pieces of that. And so like my little working group worked on what would the management platform look like? And so we decided, maybe we should move from COM to WMI. And, maybe we should move from this configuration format to that configuration format, and kind of figured out what's the roadmap for this thing look like? How do we build something like that? And then we just started building it. And the schedule may have been a little aggressive. And we may have bitten off a little more than we could chew, but as a team, we kind of pulled together, and we came out with a V1 that had about half the features that we had thought originally would, and we did it in a pretty remarkable amount of time, in hindsight, largely because everybody worked really hard on it, and I look back on those pretty fondly, because it was pretty crazy to think back on what we actually did and the amount of time we did it with the people we had, the number of people.
Yeah, I remember thinking at the time, like, obviously there was this acquisition. Microsoft had invested a lot of money and effort into that platform to then switch and create a whole new platform from the ground up. It's a lot of risk. We look back on it now, and obviously it was the right decision. Like, Hyper-V is a phenomenal product. Yeah. I don't know if you could have gotten to where you are now still on the virtual server platform.
No way. Yeah, certainly not at the scale of. I mean, every node in Azure runs Hyper-V. Like that, it is our virtualization platform. The Hyper-V hypervisor, the basis of it, runs on every Xbox. It runs on almost every PC in the world. I mean, that scale, that applicability, the way that we've been able to use it has been pretty broad and powerful.
All right, so let's kick that up a notch and move that over to containers, right? Now, in the container world, same kind of thing, or maybe it's not, but we hear this different terminology. There are Windows containers, there are Docker containers, there's Hyper-V containers. Are those all the same things, or are we dealing with more than one platform and we're kind of shaking out which one is the winner? What's going on there?
They really are the same thing. So, Docker really is a tool set for building and managing containers. It's really a container manager at kind of the end of the day. The way that Docker kind of came to be is they found some features in the Linux kernel that they combined in a fairly unique way to bring some real value to developers building applications and distributing them and shipping them. And it was really combining the C groups technology in Linux, what a lot of people referred to as containers at the time, with file system redirection and some other namespacing tools in order to create this kind of packaging format with a real goal of saying it's completely immutable and it's highly reliable going from one machine to another machine. And that's really what Docker was. Now, at the time, Windows didn't have all of the right pieces to make that same technology work in a meaningful way or a uniform way. We had parts of it. We'd actually had a very similar thing to to C groups called job objects that we built really like NT4. But they didn't have all the right pieces to them. We didn't have the file system redirection. We didn't have some of the network isolation. We didn't have a lot of those kind of pieces to go with it. So that meant that Docker containers really became synonymous with Linux, and that there really wasn't an equivalent technology on Windows. And originally, when we started on the project, our goal was to build something that kind of competed with Docker. That was our original, when we set out on it, day one, it was like, hey, let's go compete against this Docker thing. And that was really a naive point in time. We didn't really understand what Docker was yet. We didn't really understand the customer goals, the business goals. And I talked about earlier how that's kind of our job is to go figure out what do customers need, what does a business need, how do we bring those together. When we started doing that, we realized that our customers liked the Docker tool set. And they really wanted the ability to run that same tool set and have kind of the same experience on Windows. They didn't want to abandon their Windows apps. They loved the apps that they had built. They had invested years and blood, sweat, and tears into building those apps. They just wanted to manage them better and deploy them better. And so the right answer really was to go figure out how to partner with Docker and make that same technology available to Windows customers. And that ultimately ended up being a great exploration into open source, because it wasn't partnering with Docker. It was partnering with the Docker community. Docker was just the company in front of the community. And so it was really us joining that community and saying, hey, we want to go make the same cool technology work on Windows, and we're going to contribute the code to do it. And we're going to work with you on bridging the gaps between the Linux experience and the Windows experience. And that was a really a phenomenal experience. Probably one of the things that in my career certainly one of the things I look back on now as being the most kind of proud of. I think one of the things I'll look back on long term.
Yeah, you mentioned like competing against Docker, and when you said that, I started thinking, wait a minute, because you guys seem to be pretty buddy with Docker.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong here. With Windows, don't you like automatically get a license for Docker Enterprise when you're running on the Windows platform?
Yep. Yeah. So as we finished the work with the Docker community, Docker Incorporated, the company kind of behind Docker, had become pretty close partners. And we realized we had a really great opportunity to provide the kind of Windows experience that our customers expect. So they expect to be able to call 1-800-Microsoft and get support if they have a problem. And all of a sudden we've got this open source technology that's not quite the same way. And how do we bridge that gap for our customers? So we were able to work with Docker Inc. and strike a deal to provide their enterprise supported Docker engine at no additional charge to any Windows Server customer. And so today you go install Windows Server 2016 or now 2019 as we just released that. And when you install Docker, you get the enterprise supported Docker engine. You can still call Microsoft. We take the call. We work with Docker on the back end. It's just like the experience you would have if you were installing Hyper-V.
Now, I've worked with Docker a good bit, but always in the Linux world. I'm pretty heavily involved with the Linux systems here at ITProTV, and I know Microsoft's partnered up. You have Windows containers now. I believe they're all running Windows Nano. Is that correct? Is that the container platform?
We have Nano Server, Server Core, and we just, with Server 2019, introduced the Windows image. So just like with Docker, you can run, Alpine or Ubuntu or CentOS on really any kernel. On the Windows side, if you install Windows Server 2019, you can run the Windows image, which is like full Windows. You can run Server Core, or you can run Nano Server, all three images on that same OS.
Yeah, back last December, we do our tech predictions for the year, things that are going to happen in 2019 or in 2018 back then. And I had made a prediction. I said, look, containers are really ramping up. Everybody's moving forward. Microsoft is eating it up. I bet Microsoft releases their own supported version of Linux in 2018. Well, it's October. We're ticking down the months. We're running out of time. I don't think that's going to happen in 2018 anymore. And I was surprised to see the support for Windows in a containerized environment ramp up so much this year that I guess you could argue you don't really need a Microsoft-branded Linux at that point.
Well, and we have done work within the Windows platform to support Linux containers on Windows. So my team also owns the Windows subsystem for Linux, as well as our Linux container support. And the way that we've provided that is that we use this HyperV isolation technology that we originally built for Windows containers. And we originally built it for running containers in Azure. So imagine you're running two functions, one provided by Coke and one provided by Pepsi, and you want to run them on the same server. And you have to assume that one of the two of them is trying to steal the secrets of the other. You just have to make that assumption. And there's just been too many kernel breakouts for us to be able to say confidently to both of them, we guarantee your data. We guarantee that we can run this isolated. So we built this VM technology where we run the container inside of the VM. Now, so it may sound familiar to some people. Kata containers in the Linux space have done similar things recently, kind of following the same model. That work allowed us to also run a Linux kernel inside of that little VM, and then run a Linux container inside of it. So it even further allows us to bridge the gap between Linux and Windows, cats and dogs, pigs flying, all of those things.
Yep. Now, the Windows subsystem for Linux, I'm glad you mentioned it. I really enjoy that. I haven't used it much in a production environment, but like on my own personal machine, I use it literally every single day. I use it for a lot of different things. Is that considered production ready at this point, or is that still a work in progress?
It's always going to be kind of an ongoing effort, like many things in Windows are, right? In TFS, we continue to add new features to, even though it was built in, the 80s, right? We're always working on Windows subsystem for Linux, but it is production supported. We actually do include it with server as well. On the server side, it's really meant for kind of a tooling admin kind of mode, as opposed to running like a SQL database or a MySQL database. We'd still recommend that be run through kind of the native port. But let's say you wanted to log into your server core machine and fire up your favorite text editor. Party on. That's why it's there.
All right, so we're talking with Taylor Brown, Principal PM Manager at Microsoft, and I wanted to ask you, for maybe those that weren't at Ignite, can you tell us a little bit about Windows Server 2019? Maybe what's new?
Yeah.
I know we mentioned it a couple times, but maybe not everyone's up to date.
There's a ton new, and I'm already going through the mental list and realize I'm going to forget stuff as I go. So I apologize to my colleagues and peers if I forget your technology as we go through it. Obviously, near and dear to me is containers. In a lot of ways, this is kind of our V2 of containers. We've had a couple releases that we call semi-annual channel releases in between Server 2016 and 2019 that added some core little pieces of functionality. But this is kind of a big roll-up of all of that into a long-term supported release. So smaller images, better performance, a lot of work to support Kubernetes going forward. That's just kind of the container side of it. And we've got a blog with a full list of all of it on the Windows Server blog. On the broader sense, a lot of work going into software-defined. So both software-defined storage with our SDDC solution, so hyper-converged, 2 node, 4 node, 6, 8, as large as you need to get to, with great throughput, low price point, really going after those kind of environments and markets, as well as the networking side. So the ability to support, hybrid and software-defined networking. A lot of cool stuff around interconnects with Azure. So Azure File Sync for bringing files and copying them back and forth and keeping things in sync with the cloud. So for people who are doing hybrid cloud solutions now, it's a great opportunity for them. We've done some really great things with our management platform. So the Windows Admin Center, WAC, used to be called Project Honolulu, provides a great web-based management platform for Windows Server. HyperV we continue to do a lot of work in HyperV. A lot of it at this point is things that we do in Azure first, and then we bring them on-prem through Windows Server. So you'll see things like better performance and scalability and whatnot that come and light up through HyperV. So those are just a couple of the top marquee areas that I'll mention. Security also is another one that we've worked a lot on. And again, I'm sure I'm forgetting a ton of things because it's such a laundry list of great features in Server 2019.
Well, let's talk real quick about some of the things that are coming down the line. I know earlier this year, Microsoft SQL was released where it could actually be run inside of a container, which was a pretty impressive feat. Are we going to see more of the services from Microsoft, like maybe, I don't know, Exchange or SharePoint or other products like that, where they're able to run inside of containers as well? Is there any roadmap for that?
Yeah, I mean, so the kind of approach that we've taken with most of the product lines is try to figure out where does it make sense. So SQL is an obvious one. You're building an application, SQL is a part of that application. The intent is to deploy the whole app and be able to scale it out. We start to get into some of the other application platforms like Exchange or SharePoint, and it's a little harder to kind of rationalize how those would look in a container deployment environment, just based on the way that they're generally deployed. SharePoint makes a little more sense. I could see for developer kind of scenarios around that might be interesting. The Dynamics team has done something pretty interesting. They've released container images of Dynamics. And the real scenario for them is for developers who are building Dynamics connectors and testing them out and getting them ready that are ultimately going to bring them into the cloud platform. It's a way for them to run it locally on their machine. So we're certainly seeing those kind of experiences come around. Our entire IoT platform, all of our cognitive services, is being pushed out as container images. And there's a whole management platform and lifecycle around that connected with Azure to bring those on-prem or to end devices. So you're certainly seeing a huge amount of container uplift there. Pretty much every team within Azure is running containers at some level now. So whether it's the Cosmos database team, the functions team, web services, it's even hard for us to keep track of all the teams that are using containers now. They pop out of the woodwork all the time with questions and feedback and feature requests and all sorts of stuff.
All right. So one recurring theme we've seen in a number of interviews and people we've talked with this year, Azure has been killing it, just, growing at a phenomenal rate and really competing with AWS and doing great in that market. Containers have been growing in usage as well. So, this is one of those transition times where people have to look at a technology and make a decision to adopt or not. And I always think back to the 90s where people had to say, do I stick with Novell or do I pivot and go over to Windows? And now you look, and if you didn't pivot, then you were out of a job. So it looks like 2019 needs to be the year that people are moving into leveraging containers and applications like that. Would you agree that that's where people need to be focused for 2019, or is this still a little bit further out to be our mainstream way of managing our applications?
So I would say that I think people need to be thinking about their cloud strategy. The operating system in some ways is becoming a broader topic. The cloud ends up becoming kind of an operating system of itself. And so when I think about the roles that we've traditionally thought of our OS, where we put an application on it, it manages the resources for us, we can install and uninstall it. That's a lot of what the cloud platforms are doing now. I push my application to the cloud, I can manage it, and I can run it. And so even for people who aren't really ready to go to public cloud yet, or have a long roadmap to get there, I think you've got to start thinking about what that's going to look like. Maybe it's 10 years out. And what I find is that containers are a really, really useful stepping stone towards that, because it allows us to start to think about our applications as redeployable entities where we have to separate the state from the application. And that's a journey. We're going to have to go through and do some work to get there. For some companies, that's a many, many year journey. I was talking to a company the other day that's got 30,000 deployments they have to do, and they've got like 6,000 applications. Like, that's a lot of work. So you're not going to do it overnight. And if you don't start now, it's going to take you even longer to get to a point where you can make that transition. And so I think that's what I would advise people to be thinking about is, how do I start to operate and think about my development, my deployments in a way that's going to help me move to more agile platforms, whether that's Azure, AWS, Google, something completely different, whatever it is, on-prem, or just the data center across the highway. There's going to be a movement in the 10-year horizon, and you're going to have to be ready for it.
Well, I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity. We get to interview a lot of people, and some people are varying levels of influence. With you being involved in the program team there at Microsoft, I want to take an opportunity to say the next time you guys have a brainstorming meeting and you're trying to figure out what to do next, I think the world's ready for a new version of Microsoft Bob. I think we've reached that point, and just bring that up with the team. Let them know.
Okay.
Well, you've got that box behind you here, Don. I was thinking,
I know,
are you going to go on eBay after this and try to get the box that he had? Well, can we see that box again?
The Virtual Server 2005.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we get the Enterprise Edition.
His is still in the shrink wrap.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I have the even more special one. I have the Japanese copy too.
Oh wow! Now those aren't in the Microsoft Store anymore, correct? We can't run over to Redmond and okay.
No,
yeah, it's back in the day.
These are my official "you shipped it" box copies.
Perfect.
Yeah, the times change so fast, don't they? Well, it's really exciting stuff. Before we wrap up the interview, are there any other things that you want to highlight? Any questions we didn't ask or things that we missed?
I would advise people. We think about containers as a dev tool often. We talked quite a bit at Ignite this year, as well as last year, about how we bridge this gap between kind of the dev world and this DevOps world, and how do we bring those together. I'm not a huge fan of the DevOps term because it always has felt a little bit like you're just telling ops folks they have to be developers. But I do think there's some power in saying, hey, how do we change the way we work? How do we think about things a little differently? So, if you're coming at this from an IT background and you're like, they're telling me I got to be a dev again, they're telling me I've got to think about it this way. I guess I would recommend challenge your assumptions a little bit. Take a look at the session that we did at Ignite, and think about how do you play a role in kind of helping the broader team move towards these more agile technologies. I think you'll be surprised at how much that helps your career and your enjoyment of your career.
So I know if we want to find out what's going on with Microsoft, we could just turn on the TV or go to Microsoft.com. But if we want to find out what's going on with your team specifically and some of the news coming out of containers and those kinds of things, where are some good places to check out?
So for containers, if you go to aka.ms/containers, that'll link you off to our documentation. And we're going to be doing a push to update the documentation over the next couple months as well. The other place that I recommend people look at, we have a blog that our team maintains. It's the virtualization blog. So if you just look for virtualization blog Microsoft in your favorite search engine, you'll find it right away. And that actually goes all the way back to HyperV days. And actually even before that, I think we even still have virtual server content on there. And so we've just maintained it. We've just continued to use that as a place where we talk about, new announcements, new features, changes that we're making, all of those kind of things.
And I'm not just kissing up, but my favorite search engine is Bing because I do get Amazon gift cards for searching. I'm averaging about one a month, so pretty proud of that.
Yeah. But I'm right with you. I just cashed mine in for a Starbucks gift card, which I'm about to go get in a minute.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you so much. We won't keep you from that, but we do want to thank you for taking the time to join us today, and maybe we'll catch up at Ignite again next year and see what's new with the team.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
All right, and thank you all of you for watching, but don't go away. We've got more on the Technado coming up right after this.
My name is Dana Morrison. I'm the IT director at Grace Christian School in Raleigh, North Carolina. IT directors often hoard so much knowledge that it's hard for their team members to learn. ITProTV has given us the ability to level up our technicians to a point where they can decide, this is important for me to learn. I would recommend ITProTV to any IT team. It's just a great tool for any IT professional.
All right, welcome back to Technado. Thanks for joining us for that interview, and thank you especially to Taylor for joining us all the way from the West Coast, where it's much earlier than it is over here right now. And Don, what'd you think? Did it live up to what you were hoping for there?
Yeah, I mean, it was really cool to talk to him, and I am going to be just crestfallen if we don't get a new Microsoft Bob next year. But we'll see. You know, maybe you got to plant the seeds where you can and see what it turns into.
Yeah, I'd be really surprised if next week we didn't see some new things back on this back wall, though, as well, if you don't spend a little time on eBay after this and see what's available. But so I know that there's been some problems, right, with Windows Server 2019 in terms of its rollout.
Yeah, you know, there was honestly, it was a problem with upgrades, right?
Okay.
Where in certain scenarios of doing an upgrade for Windows 10 and Windows Server 2019, that some files can end up being deleted. They've corrected that, as far as I know, and the rollout has either already started or is about to start again. It should have already started by now. Thing is, with servers, we don't normally do in-place upgrades. They're the normally clean installs and you migrate data over. So it didn't really affect them, but Microsoft had to pull it anyway because it is a common core under the hood. The upgrade process for Windows 10 and Windows Server 2019 are basically identical. So that caused a yank. So I wouldn't really label it as like, oh, it's a problem with Windows Server 2019. It's just a problem with the upgrade system. If you're not upgrading, it's not a big thing to worry about at all.
Sounds good. All right, well, we wanted to let you know about a couple things coming up from ITProTV. First of all, we've got a few webinars coming up here. If you go ahead and check out itpro.tv/webinars, we've got a list of all the ones coming up and all the ones that have already happened that you can actually go ahead and download those as well and watch those videos, even if you're not able to join live. But if you are able to join live, you can ask questions and give us feedback right on the spot, and that's always helpful. We just did some really fun ones with the dark web. We had some great attendance, great responses there, so that was a lot of fun, and we're always looking for topics of new things to do, so let us know if there's anything you want to see there. Also, want to let you know about an offer. If you're interested in learning more about ITProTV, well, check us out over at go.itpro.tv/Technado. That's right, that's a special offer for those of you watching or listening to the Technado. We've got some 30% off promo codes there for you and some information about team pricing if that's something you're looking at getting for your business as well. So check that out over at go.itpro.tv/Technado. Well, that's going to do it for us today here on the show. Don, any final thoughts before we wrap up and you get on eBay?
Yeah, I think everybody's got the message now. Like, if you're not leveraging containers in your environment, you need to be at least learning about it. Docker is free. You can download it, install it, and run it. If you've got a Windows Server install, you have access to Docker Enterprise. The license is included in the base OS. So jump in there, take advantage of it. It's a fun thing to learn, too. It's always neat to learn something new and different. Containers certainly meet both those criteria.
All right, sounds good. Well, looking forward to seeing what our interview is next week because they keep topping each other. So thank you for joining us today, but check back for that for sure. And we will see you next time right here on Technado.
Are you enjoying Technado? Then be sure to check out our other podcast, Ask Me Anything, where our subject matter experts answer your questions. Here's the latest episode, and here's the full playlist. And as always, be sure to subscribe to ITProTV's channel. ITProTV!